A CISO is a business risk and culture leader first, and a cyber leader second. Is that a controversial statement? It shouldn't be. Greetings and welcome to the fourth installment of the Cybersecurity Council podcast. I'm your host, Scott Brammer. We will be joined later by our president, Brian Greene. At the Cybersecurity Council, our commitment is to serve cyber leaders. We want to elevate the thought leaders in cyber and to bolster the entire cybersecurity community. Our goal is to clarify cyber and business best practices. Our call to action: assemble the council. It embodies our dedication to promoting a collaborative approach to cybersecurity. Right now, we're partway through a series we're calling Searching for the Cyber Leader. In the previous episode, we explored the definitions of cyber, cyberspace, cybersecurity, and we even touched upon information security. Cyber is computers and technology, especially networks. And cyberspace is an environment created by interactions within a network. Cybersecurity is most associated directly with cyber attacks. But we also learned that information security and cybersecurity are two sides of the same coin, and that because the terms are used interchangeably, a cyber leader can expect to be active on both sides of that coin. We covered this territory because we're trying to understand the cyber leader's domain so we can properly understand and frame their role. Now we're moving on to the next part of the journey. We will directly confront the proverbial elephant in the room, the 800-pound gorilla, the CISO, or CSO. The CISO sits atop both cybersecurity mountain and information security mountain. In this episode, we keep searching for the modern cyber leader, but we're going to take the top-down approach. The CISO is our preeminent leader of leaders, and that's going to be our focus. Our objective today is to better understand the mission and scope of all cyber leaders through the lens of the CISO. We're going to take it a step farther, and we're going to cross-compare the CISO role with all the other cyber leader roles. As a bit of a personal aside, and definitely within the view of the Cybersecurity Council, we hold that leadership in cyber can happen across the hierarchy, across the organization. It doesn't just occur at the top. The CISO is not the only cyber leader. There are many. One could even argue that an intern can be a cyber leader. And that's really because true leadership is derived from much more than just holding an authority position. The CISO carries an executive mandate, and they can have fiduciary responsibilities. The authority granted to them and the limitations and the constraints that they face shape all of their teams and cyber leaders everywhere. We aim to see how the CISO role shapes cyber leadership beyond just itself. Now it's time for a challenge. As a reminder, I provide a challenge every episode, and this challenge is meant to be either a thought experiment to make you a little wiser or an actual act to grow a skill or establish some kind of an awareness. As we continue to explore the definition of cyber leader, and we're deeply exploring CISO today, please ask yourself these questions. In your day job, in what ways do you embrace the unique elements of the CISO role? What part of the CISO is you? And number two, how do cyber leaders thrive under the CISO umbrella? How do they make their own mark? How do they become effective leaders or thought leaders in their own right? So let's assemble the council. I would like to outline what we are going to discuss today as a series of questions. What exactly is a CISO? Why is the role of a CISO so pivotal in debates surrounding cyber? How do the roles and responsibilities of a CISO differ from those of a cyber leader? Or to phrase the question differently, what does the CISO have to do that almost no other cyber leader under their umbrella has to do? And what does that teach us about cyber leadership? And further, We're going to go through all of the titles that a cyber leader might have. Senior vice president, senior director, all the way down the line. There's a lot of different types of cyber leaders. And once we understand this landscape, we can get to the final question, which is what leadership qualities does a cyber leader have to bring to the table in order to thrive? Before we begin, I have a confession to make. I feel a little bit of apprehension about being someone that's trying to define the role of CISO. Theoretically, I know what I'm talking about, so this should be easy. We're into episode 4 now, and I haven't taken time to introduce myself. So I'm going to do that a little bit right now by telling you why I'm a little bit apprehensive about defining the role of CISO, even though I know what I'm talking about. On my path to becoming a Chief Information Security Officer, I checked a lot of the boxes to make sure my credentials and my house was in order. I bring 3 years of experience as a CISO to the table, preceded by 18 months as a Business Information Security Officer, which is basically a line of business CISO. I've also held other notable roles in both security and IT in different industries. I've worked in both cybersecurity and information security. I've even got a patent or two on both sides of the fence here. The point is, I've seen it, I've done it, and I have some scars to prove it. Academically, I have a master's in cybersecurity. I've run my own business on the side. I also have many technical certifications, to include several in security, risk, and compliance. Perhaps most importantly, especially to the domain of cyber leadership, is I've attended a number of executive leadership programs, including from a premier institution in the field. I'll tell you more about that another time. But I studied the art of being both a chief information officer and a chief information security officer. I feel like you've got to know both in order to be both. My proposition or intention here is not to boast. Self-promotion is not my goal, though I'm going to acknowledge right here, right now, hello, I'm presenting a podcast, so there is self-promotion in there a little bit. But when I contemplate my own journey as a CISO, including the experiences in the role itself, I feel just as much apprehension as I do pride or a sense of accomplishment. This stems from recognizing that neither the preparation for the role nor cumulative progressive experience to get to the role is enough. These things just do not fully illuminate the reality of what a CISO is. You can prepare all day and you might still not be ready. The CISO role is sort of like something you can quickly conceptualize, but it's going to take you a lifetime to master. Now, make no mistake, preparation and experience is invaluable. The time spent will be merited. It will return its investment. But I'm just cautioning that there's more complexity to the CISO role than there may initially appear. The reality of the role differs from the theoretical understanding. It's good that we've got an entire podcast series and an entire community to explore that. But back to the anxiety. First, working in security, any domain of security, it involves addressing fear, uncertainty, and doubt. FUD. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. FUD. The CISO and many cyber leaders stand right there at the crossroad between FUD and security, or an operational requirement. Yet, I've never seen FUD on a job description. When you work in security, you're a FUD wrangler. There's another way of looking at this. It's kind of the duck metaphor, right? Calm and cool on the surface, but furiously paddling underneath the surface. That's kind of what life is like in the world of FUD. The second reason that I have some concerns about trying to capture the CISO role and put it into a bottle is that I know from personal experience that it's a super slippery role. In a moment, we'll get to the disclaimers. I'll head that off at the pass. But I just want to remind all of us up front that the CISO role is not one size fits all. Business size, regulations the business is subject to, personalities, politics, the makeup of the board of directors. Is there a board of directors? The technology stack, the budget. It all impacts what the CISO role means. And just one more thing, sometimes the CISO role is the only cyber leader in the organization. Sometimes the CISO is the only security person in an organization. This changes everything every single time. It's difficult to tie all that up with a bow. It's definitely hard to do it within one podcast, or at least one episode. So I'm going to put the core ideas on the floor today, but we're going to have to keep moving. The CISO role is not just slippery, it's elusive and it's always changing. But I do have something to contribute to the discussion, and I hope it's going to be both meaningful and relevant. Which brings us back to cross-comparing the CISO with other cyber leaders in general. Time for some disclaimers. In the last episode, I said that the responsibilities that I will call out for both the CISO role and the cyber leaders are not one size fits all. These roles are not standardized, they are not universal. Organizational culture and business needs can take precedence over best practice. It happens all the time. The activities of your friendly neighborhood CISO may differ from one CISO to the next. What the heck is a CISO? We're finally getting to the moment where we're going to start exploring the meat and potatoes of this. The Chief Information Security Officer, sometimes also called the Chief Security Officer, and that subset can imply that the security officer is in charge of both the physical and the digital. But this role is an executive, a senior level executive responsible for establishing and maintaining the vision and strategy for an enterprise security program. Let me do that as the short version. The CISO is a senior level executive responsible for establishing and maintaining vision and strategy for an enterprise security program. The key to understanding the CISO role is in plain sight. It's in their name, Chief, which implies officer status, and it's bestowing an executive mandate. The act of being a corporate officer means the role is subject to accountability and liability in unique ways. It also means there's fiduciary responsibilities. When the CISO or CSO signs on a dotted line, they really have to mean it. It amounts to something in the world of materiality. The executive functions are the CISO's primary mission. That is their one unique thing. As an executive, a CISO is focused on strategic deliverables. That could be deliverables to the board of directors, C-suite, investors. That could be strategic level business processes like client support and business development. But mostly it's really focused on outcomes. Another thing to mention is the CISO as a corporate officer is really tuned into shareholder value in ways that other cyber leaders, bless them, and this does not diminish their value, but they might not be as preoccupied. Here's the main idea. A CISO is a business, risk, and culture leader first, and a cyber leader second. Let me repeat that, because it might be the most important thing that I'm dropping in this episode. A CISO is a business, risk, and culture leader first, and a cyber leader second. They may be the most important cyber leader, but they're not a cyber leader all the time. Sometimes they're a business executive. A more plain way to talk about this kind of comparison is a CISO is an executive leader, but a cyber leader may not be. It's a rectangle is a square, but a square is not necessarily a rectangle kind of thing. All right, we're arriving at the heart of this episode. This is where we are going to cross-compare line item by line item the CISO and the cyber leader. I'm proud of this work. I hope this will be illuminating. Use it as a discussion tool. Use it as a frame of reference. There will be pieces in here that don't conform either to your expectations, your local experience, etc., and that's okay. For those of you that are on the podcast, come to the YouTube channel. You can see what we're dealing with here. So what this is a cross comparison of the CISO and non-executive cyber leaders, which basically means almost everybody else except maybe a deputy CISO or a BISO. That's where we are. What's going to happen is I will give a factor, and then we're going to talk about how the CISO does it and how the non-executive cyber leader does it. Here we go. Factor, purpose. What is the purpose? A CISO mobilizes resources to achieve a business outcome, but a cyber leader mobilizes resources to achieve cyber outcomes, execution. A CISO is primarily strategic. I'm putting primarily in italics, while a cyber leader is primarily tactical. This can upset the apple cart. A lot of people may not fully understand the difference between strategic and tactical. That is worthy of a quick digression. Strategy is a holistic viewpoint. It's really looking at the overall mission, commander's intent. What does success look like? Whereas tactics are, how do I get from point A to point B? What are the steps I need to achieve to get to that success, to achieve that vision? There is more. We will have entire discussions about strategy versus tactics in the future. But here I'm saying a CISO is primarily strategic. A cyber leader is primarily tactical. And my defense of that is I'm thinking of cyber leaders as senior director of security operations, or I'm thinking of a cyber leader as lead security engineer. Again, not totally clean cut, but that's where we are. All right, factor, scope of management. A CISO leads an enterprise security program, while a cyber leader leads one or more discrete security programs. Hence those titles like I just used, Senior Director of Security Operations. Accountability versus responsibility. A CISO is accountable for the security program. In many cases, they are signing documents, both on the operational side, regulatory side, and with audits stating that, I take accountability for this resource, this mission, this audit finding. A CISO is accountable for the security program, but a cyber leader is responsible for the security program. Never seen a cyber leader that's only a cyber leader and not at the CISO level get thrown in jail. But we've had several CISOs feel the brunt and weight of the federal government lately. That's what that accountability can amount to. Okay. And if we go directly to liability, factor liability, the CISO is accountable to shareholders and or fiduciary responsibilities. They have to prove legally sometimes that they're running a clean ship, that they're doing things in a timely manner, that they're exercising proper judgment. Now, that judgment might be within the interpretation of audit findings and auditors, or even forensic investigators, but there's an accountability here. The cyber leader may not have an imminent liability or accountability for the programs that they manage, or even the business resources. If a VP of vulnerability management is not getting certain parts of the infrastructure or the endpoint environment patched, they don't get sued, they don't go to jail, they just get fired. So responsible, not accountable. All right. Part 2 of 4. Getting into some very cool stuff here. Thought leadership. A CISO is a thought leader for cybersecurity's value and for opportunity. They are espousing what the organization can achieve. Their vision and mission is up at that level. A cyber leader is a thought leader for cybersecurity's function and for capabilities. A cyber leader is dreaming about a fusion center, and they're dreaming about cryptography, and they're dreaming about the next generation of firewall or quantum cryptography. A CISO is looking at the big picture, okay? value and opportunity versus function and capability. Both are thought leaders, just slightly different focuses most of the time. All right, policy development. A CISO establishes security policy. They sign it. Whereas a cyber leader identifies, creates, optimizes, and helps enforce the policy. Establish versus everything else. Okay. Empowerment. CISO has the benefit of that executive mandate, so they can empower security functions. Make it so this is the way it's going to be. This is the tool we're going to use. This is how we're going to do the thing. Where a cyber leader is supervising cybersecurity functions. They're trying to make sure that everything is right, but there are going to be limitations and constraints on what they can declare. This is the way. Okay. Factor culture warrior. A CISO establishes the culture. They establish the tone. I've often heard culture described as what you don't allow in terms of behavior in a company. The CISO has a critical role there. So a CISO establishes culture where a cyber leader cultivates culture. They're working within the bounds of what's been given to them, and now they're growing and maturing other cyber leaders. They're making sure that operations are cohesive and personnel frictions are reduced, but they're not changing the culture. They're abiding by it. Okay. Resource management. A CISO has the authority to allocate resources, where the cyber leader is optimizing and applying how those resources are governed. So one can allocate, one is optimizing the usage. All right, mission priority. What are they focused on? This is very subjective, and I admit that, but I feel that a CISO is prioritizing communication. They're trying to control the narrative in a healthy way. They want to make sure everybody is on the same page. Everybody understands the policy. Everybody understands the procedure. They know what the mission and vision are. They're prioritizing communication. It's kind of part of that establishing the culture that we just talked about. But the cyber leader, in terms of mission priority, they're really in the mission. So they're prioritizing execution. I'm not saying that cyber leaders don't communicate. In the world of business today, nothing works if you're not communicating. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying they communicate per the mission, whereas the CISO is just kind of addicted to communicating. All right, part 3 of 4, management and the management level. Where do these parties exist? A CISO sponsors projects and initiatives. They are signing on the line for the culture, for the resources, all of that. A cyber leader champions projects or initiatives. The cyber leader is closer to your line level leader. They're getting the mission done. They understand all aspects of what the project and the initiative is doing. They're doing the controlling and monitoring of the project, making sure that objectives and metrics are all aligned. Sponsor, champion. Communication priorities. A CISO is primarily framing their communications with the languages of business or technology risk. Again, they're a business executive, so they're business and risk focused. Where a cyber leader is primarily, again, I'm italicizing primarily, a cyber leader primarily frames their communications in terms of situational variables, status, operational objectives. What is the order of the day? What are we trying to do right now, tomorrow, next week? Okay. Change management. Both the CISO and the non-executive cyber leader working in change management, but what they do is a little bit different. A CISO is focusing on and thinking about shifting the culture. They established the culture. Now we got to change. How do I shift the culture to get ahead the tangible outcome that we're looking for? A cyber leader, meanwhile, is focused on shifting the activities. So let me just say that back to back. A CISO focuses on shifting culture, where a cyber leader focuses on shifting the activities. They're reordering priorities. They're reordering procedures. Cyber leader may not be, they're not influencing and changing culture as much as the CISO is trying to. Sometimes they are enlisted into that effort. They're conscripted, if you will, but it's a follow the leader type situation. Okay. Value proposition. A CISO is influenced by shareholder value and stakeholder engagement. They want to make sure that the business is creating customers, that customers are satisfied, and those customers may be other parts of the business. That's what they are focused on influencing. But a cyber leader is primarily influenced by requirements. Sometimes it's technical requirements and the effectiveness of their security deliverables. A cyber leader is, this is what I need to build this project or initiative. This is what I need to make sure that this control, this firewall, whatever is working well and it's delivering effectively with efficacy its function. Part 404. I'm calling this execution ideology. A CISO is seeking to control the narrative. I mean this in a positive way. Controlling the narrative can have some bad implications. I mean it in a positive way. When you get a lot of cyber practitioners together, their risk tolerance is low. And the CISO, as a business objective, has to say, wait, hold on, guys. We are mitigating risk. We do have operational controls. Maybe we can accept this risk, or maybe we are accepting the risk already. What I'm getting at is the CISO, as they're controlling the narrative, they're often looking to de-escalate a situation, prevent cybersecurity from running things up the flagpole that shouldn't go. This can be anything from personality conflicts to political agendas. CISO is examining all that. They want the right face of their organization to move forward. They're controlling a narrative. The cyber leader, they're interested in the narrative, but they're really seeking to control and monitor mission execution. Is my vulnerability management working? Is my endpoint protection working? That's where their head is. Okay. Last one in this cross compare. Delegation. As an aside, I come from a military background which believes that delegation is the way. Empower and delegate your people. Bring them up to your level. Cross-train them. If you can delegate every task that you have and you can go into supervised mode only, great. The CISO cannot fully inhabit this type of thinking. And that's because of their officer status and their executive mandate. The CISO has some parts of their role and responsibilities that cannot legally or operationally be delegated. They can't. They have to do it. They're the officer. They have to do it. A cyber leader gets to inhabit the world I was describing, that empower and delegate world. They may have the opportunity and the discretion to delegate everything. And now we would like to invite the president of the Cybersecurity Council, Brian Greene, to join us for a discussion. In today's episode, we tried to explore and define what is a cyber leader. We also tried to talk about how is a CISO a unique cyber leadership role. There's many different types of cyber leaders. As we went through this exploration, and we covered a CISO's executive functions, and we covered the essence of cyber leaders in general, was there anything that you were just dying to contribute to the discussion?
I think one of the trends I think we've seen, and I don't know if I can put a timestamp on this, is especially outside of privately held smaller companies, is you get to a place inside of multi-thousand person companies or tens of thousands of person companies that are publicly traded oftentimes, where there's two layers of CISO leadership inside that organization. You've got the CISO, right? That's either the global CISO or SVP and CISO, whatever the title is. And that person's predominant charge is to holistically lead the security organization from a strategy perspective, report to the C-levels and board, deal with all the regulations that come along with being a publicly traded company. They have this whole world of stuff that they're dealing with that doesn't afford them the amount of time to deal with the rest of it. So you see in many of these organizations a deputy CISO, and that's a different classification of leader, right? Like that is the person who is doing a lot of the day-to-day managerial, everybody more often than not reports up through them. They're the general to the lieutenants. They're analyzing what tools are being used across the stack today. What tools are we going to examine to fill the gaps that we have tomorrow? All the stuff, right? That the CISO of a large company, just if they needed the time to do that, they couldn't create it, right? There's too much going on top level for them to get down in the weeds. So I think that's one thing that comes from like leader. And when I look at CISO leadership now today, at bigger companies than just your couple hundred person privately held companies, there seems to be this continual trend of, we have a CISO, but we need another CISO. We need a deputy to be able to fully manage this program that's large and that's becoming ever more important.
I am grateful because it sounds like you're affirming everything that we tried to put into today's episode. Yeah. We were trying to establish the unique executive function skill sets of a CISO compared to not all, but most cyber leaders.
Right.
It's a special role within the cyber leadership sphere. I think you also were hitting on the point that all the cyber leaders are important.
Right.
You don't have to have CISO in your name to be incredibly important at mobilizing your organization to achieve success.
Absolutely.
Which brings me to this thought experiment. I'd like to offer you two different options. Tell me what is more meaningful to you.
Okay.
Maybe you just want to try to tell me which one is more correct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cyber leaders establish themselves and their credibility by successfully leading their fellow cyber practitioners.
Right.
Or cyber leaders establish themselves and their credibility by successfully influencing stakeholders outside of cyber. So again, the question is, cyber leaders become powerful by leading their fellow practitioners, or cyber leaders become powerful by influencing stakeholders outside of cyber? What do you think is more correct?
Well, I think, okay, this is a loaded question. So this brings me back to football. A lot of things bring me back to football. But when I played football in college, the difference between a coach, position coach, coordinator, head coach, and my view of that coach, in large part had to do with whether or not they successfully played football. Do they know what I'm going through? Do they know how to tell me to do my job differently so that I can become more successful because they themselves did it? Or is it just their opinion or what they've learned over time? And there are a lot of football coaches that never played football that are uber successful. But the majority of them did play the game and were successful at playing the game. And so, I think for CISOs, especially today, and especially even at smaller companies, I think it's more, you're going to assume, and I could be wrong here, that 4 out of 5 CISOs played the game, right? That they climbed the ranks through, an IC role that led to a manager role, that led to a director role, that led to a VP role, that led to CISO, something along that trajectory, right? And so they've got all this experience that backs them up every single time they talk to their team, right? Years, decades, whatever it is. And so I think that most CISO leaders are going to be effective leaders of cyber practitioners because they're going to have that level of credibility. The harder thing, I think, for a lot of CISOs in that bucket of I've grown through being an IC to a manager, to a director, to a VP, to a CISO, is that they don't necessarily know all the other parts of the business and how the business operates and what's important to the CFO and what's important to the CEO and what's important to the CLO, GC. And right, those are the people that I have to talk to all the time right? To try to convince to fund me for the technology that I want to purchase so I can get my security program the way that I want it, to hire the people that I need to help me build the security program. And just to communicate around risk and that equation of risk, which is if you talk in a certain way to the GC and the CFO about risk, the likelihood that you get the headcount and the funding that you need is significantly higher, right? Than if you don't talk to them about risk the right way. And there's a whole different language probably to use with the CEO, right? So like you got to know what's important to them. So I would say that it's more important, most likely for more CISOs to know how to communicate to their board and to their C-levels and to have that kind of MBA style understanding of how the business operates than it is for them to lead down or be credible or knowledgeable to their cybersecurity practitioners. Because if you can't get funding, like if you can't get funding from the rest of your C-levels and board to go deploy your program, you're going to lose the confidence of your team anyway. Like you're going to struggle to do your job effectively at all. So I think that one probably takes precedence. Now, hopefully the rest of it you're good at. Hopefully that's something that just has become a part of your abilities and career development over time.
You gave us a rich answer.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. At the very end, I think you persuaded yourself that influencing stakeholders outside of cyber is the more important element for a cyber leader.
I think
is
so.
that right?
For sure. I do. Yeah.
Okay, so
in publicly traded company or small privately held company, I think it's the same battle. It's just a very different battle.
To be successful at that influencing stakeholders outside of cyber, you need to speak in business terms, in risk terms. You need to translate all the technical controls and regulatory requirements into peaceful, harmonious, business-aligned, capable, digestible, baby step activities.
Right. Because if you go too deep or get too complicated on that stuff, you're going to cross your CEO's eyes. And CEOs are super intelligent people. But when you get too deep on a technical thing with the CEO, I don't know this from experience, but I imagine they oftentimes trail off into whatever it is that they actually understand and want to think about.
A cyber leader being able to lead their cyber practitioners. I don't think we can ever go away from that and its importance. And for the last few years, I feel like social media and podcasts have torn this apart in terms of the CISO can be a music major. The CISO can be a philosophy major. They can still be effective in their role. Yes, but.
Right.
I am skeptical because a CISO is going to be in a conversation where they have to be able to interpret the level of risk in a pen test finding, which means they also have to be doing the mental gymnastics on, I understand how to fix that. I understand the complexity and hidden complexity of the remediation actions. I know how long it's going to take. I know which members of my team and their resources are going to be consumed to fix it. And I know how the remediation activities are going to impact all the other lines of business and other areas within my organization and the organization at large. If you can't do all of those mental gymnastics because you've never been a cyber practitioner or even a project manager within the cyber space, I don't think you can be a CISO. That's a personal opinion.
I couldn't agree more. I think that let's just say that music major or whatever, philosophy major is an amazing leader of people and they're mildly knowledgeable or moderately knowledgeable on cyber, then what I said earlier, you better have a damn good deputy CISO.
Okay.
Right?
Yes, mitigate the risk, find other ways to achieve operational success.
If you look back across, I'm sure you could do a study. I don't want to do it, and I'm not thrilled about doing it right now with the state of politics. But if you look back over time and look at every president and every vice president, I almost can guarantee you that the most effective presidents had really amazing vice presidents.
That complemented the skill sets.
That complemented their skill set. And so,
or at least complemented electoral success, but that's another.
That's a whole nother,
conversation.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I think if you're going to be that, I would 9 times out of 10, probably more, would rather have a CISO that has security chops, cybersecurity experience, knowledge, expertise. But if I'm going to take that person who's an awesome leader of people and great, communicator to the rest of the C-level and board, there's going to be paramount importance on a deputy CISO that is everything that CISO is not.
Okay, excellent. This brings us to a great question here. Have you ever been around a cyber leader that was of equal importance to the organization as the CISO above them? Have you ever seen a cyber leader so effective that they were just as influential as the CISO above them?
Yeah, totally. I don't know if I want to name names because that'll...
Well, we shouldn't imply that the CISO is weak when this occurs.
No.
It just means the cyber leader is strong.
That's right. And then they're the next CISO, right? Like of a different company. And so I actually know people right now sitting in the step down, reporting direct to, who would make amazing CISOs, and who have a long tenure of success at the company that they're at, and a breadth of experience that would make them great at the next job if they want the next job. The question is just whether or not they want that next job, right? Like they've had a focus on, managing threats for most of their career, like internal and external, or they've had a big focus on security engineering and operations, right? Like, and do I want to go out there and now take on all of it, right? At a publicly held company or a privately held company. That's just the question that they personally have to answer themselves. But I mean, there are people inside of every organization that report direct to the CISO who if they say something, it means a lot, right? If they give an opinion on your technology, if you're a vendor, if they give an opinion on your technology that's positive or negative, it can kill you. Or it can lead to you actually winning whatever the project is.
Okay. I've observed 2 cyber leaders that were just as influential as the CISO above them. I've seen a chief security architect. What they said mattered to everyone and could turn projects and business objectives on a dime. Mm-hmm. I have also seen leaders of governance boards, like say a senior director of information security risk or technology risk, be just as influential as a CISO. What I think the 2 examples that I just gave have in common is they're both in a position where they're working with the business development-driven elements of the organization. Mm-hmm. They are not strictly cyber.
Right.
I think it is hard for someone who is cyber only to have anywhere near as much influence as a CISO or somebody of an executive or senior level is going to have. You have to be in a position that is interfacing with product, general counsel, finance, the engineering teams. So there's a prerequisite to this conversation. I always want to give street cred to all of the cyber leaders. You can have somebody in security ops that can really make things happen, somebody in governance, risk, and compliance that can really make things happen, security analyst, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
But the closer you get to the business, the more powerful you have the opportunity to be.
Totally.
Preparing to be a CISO. We've talked about all of the unique and specific skills that are executive functions. There was something that you said to me earlier today. You said this: if I were going to be a CISO, I would want to be a CISO of a private equity firm and learn the ropes before I became a
privately held
CISO.
company.
Before I became a CISO of a publicly traded organization.
Yep.
Could you say more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I'm going to bore people with this, but back to football, if you're going to be a head coach for the first time, is it easier to be a head coach at an established program that is known for winning, where you're completely funded, right? You've got anything you need, or to go to a place like my alma mater, Duke University, where you have all these crazy challenges that most 90% of the other college football programs don't have. The academic requirements for your players are significantly higher. You've got a board that cares about basketball and cancer and fighting cancer, and that's what they want to fund. They don't really care about football that much. You got to convince them, like, this is why we should fund football more. There's all these complex challenges at a place like Duke versus a place like Alabama, for example. That isn't a quick comparison to if I'm a first-time anything, specifically in this conversation, a CISO. Do I want to go to a place where it's a privately held company where I just have to learn how to be a CISO for the first time? I have to report to my C-levels. I have to report to my board. And I'm going to learn all that and sharpen my teeth in that environment. And I've got to lead down on a team that's probably a lot smaller than if you're at a publicly traded company. Or do I want that first CISO job to be at a publicly traded company where I have all of that same stuff with probably a much bigger team, and then all of the regulations and all of the stuff that comes with being publicly traded, right? All the regulatory things you have to deal with now that's constantly changing, right? So you're going to be your two learning processes at privately held company and publicly held company for first-time CISO. One is going to be a lot harder, and a lot more complex than the other. So I would say, and look, I'm a 10+ year cybersecurity sales person and leader giving advice to CISOs, which is a bad idea in the first place. But I would say that if it was me looking at the job, based on what I know about from talking to many CISOs over the last 3 to 10 years, is I would go jump from whatever leadership role I'm in to privately held company CISO versus whatever leadership role I'm in to publicly traded company CISO. I just think that from what I know, one is far more complex than the other and will be a lot harder to learn on the fly with.
Cutting your teeth in the private side can be a little bit, maybe easier is not the right word, but at least you don't have regulators screaming at you on day one.
Right.
So there's some things that you can.
That's right. There's things that you don't have to do in that job that you have to do in this job.
Okay.
And so anything that complicates your ability to do the job makes the job harder, right? And so my opinion would be go learn how to be a CISO at a privately held company, and then once you know that stuff, it'll be second nature when you go take the publicly traded CISO job.
Okay. All right, I've got another thought experiment for you, and this is all in the name of exploring what is the best cases for cyber leaders. Okay, let's say you're the CEO of a company, and you're trying to hire your first or your next CISO, either one. You have two identical candidates to choose from. They have the same job experience, the same certifications. They've even won the same awards. They're totally the same person, except for one thing. One of them has a master's degree in business, and one of them has a master's degree in cybersecurity. Which one do you choose?
I kind of said this earlier. If we make the assumption that those two identical candidates both have a wealth of cybersecurity experience, and they're not music majors or philosophy majors, then I would take the one that has the MBA, only because that would come with me knowing that they're going to understand the rest of the way the business operates much more than the one that doesn't have the MBA. They're going to be able to think in financial terms with much deeper understanding. They're going to be able to think in operational terms with much deeper understanding. They're going to be able to know what is important to me as the CEO with much deeper understanding. And again, knowing that they have hopefully, 5, 10, 15, 20 years of cyber experience, hands-on cyber experience prior to that.
And that will close us out for today's show. We have 2.5 questions on our journey to finish as we are searching for the cyber leader. We will get to those next time. See you soon. Welcome to the Cybersecurity Council. This council strives to showcase unique cybersecurity leadership stories. Its mission is to demystify and simplify cybersecurity across the entire business landscape. Best practices, lessons learned, operational recommendations, it's all here. Brought to you by the Cybersecurity Council, LLC, Brian Greene and myself, Scott Brammer, will be your hosts. We have come in from the cyber wilderness, not just to share what we have learned, but to find and elevate some of the most important voices in cyber. Brian is a former Division I college football player who has experience across many cybersecurity software startups. He has a successful exit on his resume too. He's also the founder and president of this very community, the Cybersecurity Council. Myself, Scott Brammer, I'm a former Marine and active CISO, and I have 3 patents in cyber and risk. As hosts, we are here to elevate best practices and strengthen the cyber community, both for the community itself and its allies. The Cybersecurity Council has had auspicious beginnings here in the Austin, Texas community, but we are already going worldwide. Everyone should be a cyber practitioner. The views expressed on this podcast, either by us or by our guests, are our own, and they do not necessarily reflect the view of our organizations. This podcast is intended as a forum for professional knowledge, but it is not legal or regulatory advice. Always consult your legal professionals for legal and regulatory matters. And now,
assemble the council.